gonna keep running through it. As the Reformation spread through Europe in the 1500s, small conflicts began to break out between the Protestants and Catholics in the German states. As bishops passed away, there was vacancies in the German principalities. In these principalities, there was a race to fill these vacancies between the Catholics and Protestants, due to the power the bishops had. The Lutherans were able to secure a bishopcy, which had a vote in electing who the Holy Roman Emperor was. The Protestants soon formed a union in 1608 to defend all of their earnings and to negotiate with the British, the Dutch, and the French. The Catholics soon followed suit, started negotiating with the Spanish to take down the Protestant powers.
The 30 Years' War can be split into 4 phases: the Bohemian, Danish, Swedish, and the Swedish-French phase. We'll start with the Bohemian.
For Bohemian Protestants to ensure their liberties, they had to throw out the king, King Matthias, in a movement called the Defenestration of Prague. As a result, King Matthias sent troops to attack the Bohemian people. The Bohemian people decided to end his reign forever.
The Bohemians chose Calvinist elector Palatine, head of the Protestant Union, to be their new king, and they tried to use him to get assistance from the other Protestants of Europe.
Ferdinand, Matthias' successor, formed an alliance with King Philip of Spain and Duke Maximilian of Bavaria to take down the Protestants in Bohemia.
Bohemian Protestants were unable to find any other allies to match the size of the Grand Alliance created by King Ferdinand, so as a result, King Ferdinand and his forces crushed the Protestants in the Battle of White Mountain.
As punishment for their insolence, Ferdinand had Bohemia re-Catholicized, and all of Protestantism was stamped out in Austria.
After all the conflict in Bohemia, a new phase of the war started, and this was the Danish phase.
In 1621, the Protestant Union was dissolved, and the Protestants looked to a new leader, the King of Denmark, also known as the Duke of Holstein. The Duke of Holstein wanted to construct a kingdom for his son by obtaining German bishopsies. When the Duke got into the fighting, he had help from the Dutch, the English, and promises from Richelieu.
Ferdinand commissioned Albert of Wallenstein to raise an army against the King of Denmark and his Protestant allies. He assembled a force of professional fighters who lived off pillaging to maintain their army. The army was the personal tool of Wallenstein, so it wasn't really under the influence of Ferdinand, except for his commissioning of it. Wallenstein and other generals commissioned by Ferdinand defeated the King of Denmark very quickly, reached the Baltic coast, and then invaded the Danish peninsula. Now at this time, the Counter-Reformation enters Germany, and Emperor Ferdinand issues the Edict of Restitution of 1629, which declares all church territories secularized since 1552 restored to the Catholic Church. This action greatly alarmed the French and the Swedes, and Cardinal Richelieu of France hoped to counter the great power of the Habsburgs with the use of allies of other Protestants.
Now starts the third phase of the 30-Year War, the Swedish phase. Gustavus Adolphus, a Lutheran and the head Protestant of the time, conciliated all the parties of Sweden and created one of the most modern armies of the time, using the mobile cannon as their main weapon.
While the Swedish were invading Germany, Richelieu gave financial help and negotiated with Catholic states to sow discord among them and tried to isolate the Holy Roman Emperor. With the aid of Saxony, the Swedish were able to win many victories in the fight against the Emperor, but because of disagreements on both sides of the war, these victories didn't really amount to that much. After the many victories by the Swedish and the Saxons, Wallenstein ceased to fight the Swedes and the Saxons and entered into talks with them himself to try to create a better position for himself and his future heirs. While Wallenstein was negotiating with the Swedish, the Saxons signed the Peace of Prague in 1685 with the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. These talks between various foreign powers isolated the Swedish inside of Germany and prolongated the 30 Years' War, and France and Spain both were not entities in Germany, wanted to keep the fighting in there and keep fighting between Protestants and Catholics.
And now for the final phase, the French and Swedish phase. Finally, Richelieu openly started to support the German Protestants. He then moves France's army into the Rhine, who initially suffer large casualties at the hands of the Spanish. After initial skirmishes, the Spanish drove into France and ravaged Champagne and Burgundy. Due to revolts by Portugal and Catalonia, Spain had to pull back some of its forces from France and lost most of the ground it had gained.
As a result of the rebellion, France recognizes the legitimacy of Portugal and streamlines the troops into Catalonia to combat the Spanish. Inside of Germany at this time, it was mainly an international struggle on German soil between the Swedish, French, and Spanish, all for the rights, mainly political, but kind of for the rights of the Protestants and the Catholics. As a result of all the invasions by foreign powers, German citizens have felt a resentment against the foreigners. As a result of all this fighting in Germany, we can see that the population of Germany was vastly reduced in towns and cities, so the people there just couldn't work the lands, and therefore the nobles lost money on their estates when there wasn't enough serfs to work them.
It's fitting that the war ends where it started. In Bohemia at the Battle of Jankov, the Swedes finally achieved victory. In 1648, the Peace of Westphalia officially ended the war. The German states wanted peace and to reform the entirety of the Holy Roman Empire. Due to the participation of all the German states and the disorganization of their wants and needs, the negotiation process took a very long time. The amount of powerful nations sitting together, working together, had not happened in over 200 years. France and Spain continued to fight until 1659. Peace was the end to the Counter-Reformation in Germany because it allowed German states to determine their own religion, and it finally accepted Calvinism as a faith.
As a result of the 30 Years' War and the Peace of Westphalia, the Holy Roman Empire was dissolving and falling apart. The Dutch and the Swiss no longer belonged to the Holy Roman Empire and were recognized as sovereign nations. In the Peace of Westphalia, much land was divvied up and given to many people. The French received sovereignty over 3 Lorraine bishoprics and certain rights in Alsace. The King of Sweden received bishoprics in Bremen, Verden, and the western half of Pomerania, including the city of Stettin. The mouths of 3 German rivers were now controlled by non-Germans. The Oder, the Elbe, and the Weser were controlled by Sweden. The Catholic state of Bavaria obtained a part of the Palatinate and a seat on the Electoral College of the Holy Roman Emperor.
At the end of the 30 Years' War, the Habsburgs started focusing more on their land and less on others. It marks the decline of the Habsburg family.
After the 30 Years' War, the places that were released by the Holy Roman Empire were allowed to flourish in the economic world and became superpowers of economics and commerce.
Not only did their empire decline, but so did their armies. Most of their army consisted of mercenaries, and it was too costly to pay a large army of mercenaries, so the Habsburgs had to cut down. It was evident to all nations that they needed to cut back on mercenaries in the army.
The mercenary troops that were remaining in Germany turned to pillaging and plundering the local German villages to support their friends and families that they brought along with them. The presence of the mercenaries greatly angered the peasants of Germany and created a sense of anger and resentment towards them and the nobility of Germany. Because so many peasants died in the 30 Years' War, the noblemen needed to work their presents they already had more and more and more, and had to increase taxes to generate more and more revenue to pay for the armies they had during the 30 Years' War.
The price of oats and rye fell by more than 2/3, and the population also fell. In 1600s, there was 2,980 people born. However, in 1617, there was only 900.
All these factors, like the mercenaries, the banditry, the lack of food, the lack of money, that taxation, the overworking, led to create like open rebellions and violent uprisings by the peasants during the time period after the war. After the Treaty of Westphalia, which allowed individual German states to choose their own religion, it created a sense of sectionalism because all the people would feel differently about everything because they'd all have a different religion and different perspectives on all the other things going on around them.
Between the drop in population and the rising in prices, Germany lost all of its standing in the economic market. Now, the Netherlands and France were the economic superpowers.
As a result of the Peace of Westphalia, the German states were virtually sovereign. They had right to conduct diplomacy with foreign nations like France, Spain, England, the United Provinces, and the Swedish. No laws could be made in the Holy Roman Empire, or taxes levied, soldiers recruited, or declared, or peace treaties ratified without consent of each individual imperialist state. The interior of Germany was wrecked by the 30 Years' War because all their agriculture was ruined, a third of their population was dead, and all the cities were sacked. The 30 Years' War also marked the decline of Spain as an international power in Europe, and it ended a period of religious. The 30 Years' War and the Peace of Westphalia paved the way for many future leaders.